athlete, but I want to just emphasize that if you are not from outside of America or Canada for that matter, because we'll be mentioning Canada definitely, because they accept foreigners in their college league, this will also help you. Because what we want to do is highlight basically the struggles that athletes are going to have when they come over as foreigners. But honestly, you're going to be one of those athletes probably with those foreigners. So you need to understand those struggles because they could also be your struggles. And make sure that, yeah, you share this out to any teammates that are doing the same thing as you so we can help them. Hi, Inma. Audio good?
No.
No, but it's okay. While you're figuring it out, you know how it gave you a little pop-up to say, Mike, try and select a different one if you call back in and see if it'll work. And if not, you can always comment on the side. Worst case scenario.
I see, Tati, you're just calling. Oh, there's Lina. And
I don't see anyone yet. Hi, Lina.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you great.
Great.
Inma's like, what is going on? It's the tech, I'm telling you. It didn't even let me into the first session. I went to click, everything was open already, and boom. So if you're joining us and you have issues with the Blab, even if it's like commenting or whatever, asking questions, by the way, you ask questions by /Q and then write your question out. It'll show up there on the left, and we will definitely be answering that. We want to make sure, I don't know how, there we go. We want to make sure that everybody has a great experience here, and we'll definitely be answering questions at the end. We'll try and hit as many up as we can. So, Lina, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
So everything's working. Why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background in being a foreign college student athlete and where you are today, what point of your life?
So my name is Lina Taylor. I was born in Bulgaria, and in 1992, at 17 years old, I was one of the first Eastern European athletes to go on a scholarship to the US. And it was interesting because you can imagine in 1992, we didn't have the internet like we do now. Mm-hmm. So my recruiting story has to do with a letter being thrown out in the trash and a pen pal finding it.
Wow.
That's right. So it was even before that I realized my education is really important. And the way to do it is to use my athletic skills that I had been getting since the age of 8 to try to earn an education. And it wasn't like I didn't have aspirations to be a professional athlete because, like I mentioned, from the age of 8, all I wanted to do was play volleyball. Mm. And but at one point, when I was 16 or 17, I realized that getting an education is going to be the key for the rest of my life. I don't know how I was that wise, or maybe it was my parents passing that on. But the realization that you're going to be an ex-athlete a lot longer than a current or a professional athlete sunk in. And so that became the number one priority for me.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. I hope people there understand that this is really about doing things now that help you out in the future, whether that's in your sport, your life, or your professional career, whether you're going into, you're working for someone and working to build whatever goal or vision they have, or whether you're working to build whatever goal or vision you have in your own entrepreneurial venture, or both. It's all possible. And so Lina wouldn't have had these possibilities had she not started thinking on that path, and probably had these mentors in her life, right? Because they always shape kind of the direction we go or we feel is correct and allow us to do that with support.
But I do want to add one more thing, because this is very critical in the young athletes that I talk to nowadays. I also felt that too. On one hand, if you train to be a professional athlete since a young age, going to a university and getting your education feels like you're giving up on your athletic dream. And I think that that's real, and we have to address it in this chat. It's very important because it felt to me like I was giving up some opportunity in the professional world. If you don't get scouted by the age of 17 or 18, a lot of times people think like you don't have a chance. However, that's not really true. It's a perceived reality. So even getting out of college at the age of 21, I chose to go back to being a professional athlete. And I chose to play even a new sport, beach volleyball. I transitioned from volleyball to beach volleyball. And I played for another 10 years, qualified and played in 2 Olympics. So that career was also open to me. Although at the time when I made the commitment to go to school, it felt like I gave up on that dream.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, and that is a huge thing because that's something that I come up across all the time when I'm dealing with athletes, because one of the things that I do with EliteVolley.com is I help these young players transition over to the States. And I felt like there was this big issue where agents and people who weren't even agents, they were charging players these crazy amounts of money that they can't afford because they're from these, third and second world countries, and it blew my mind that someone was trying to make their journey tougher, because really it should just be easy. We should be helping people get their education, and then when they turn professional, it should be something. So just know that you have support, and when you do make this transition, it doesn't mean it's the end of everything. It's actually a new beginning. And there's some players, like for instance, if you listen to the podcast that I have, Lina, I really hope that you're going to be on the podcast because you have a great story. I can tell already. But I had Sanja Tomasovic on there from Serbia. This is one example. She went to the States thinking, I just got injured. They want me to come there. I'm going to go and I'm going to get my education because my parents are pushing me to do that. It's a great option at this point since I'm injured and not sure I can play anymore. She went. The facilities are amazing. They got her healthy. She became an All-American, won a national championship. And just so you know, in the sports in the States, like for volleyball, if you're playing on those final 4 teams, you're on teams that are competing at one of the highest levels in Europe, actually. They're not bad teams. These teams go over to Europe and they compete with pro teams, and sometimes they win. So, of course, not with maybe the Champions League teams, but they are strong, strong teams. So just know that you're not giving up a ton. You're actually gaining something. And like she did, she turned to her sport back after college, and now she's into a profession. So why don't we talk a little bit about how that whole process went for you, and how it's different now with email and internet and all of that stuff. But the process of thinking, okay, this is an option. This school's interested in me, or these schools, and how do I get started? What are my first steps?
Well, this is a crazy story because I was 14 when the Berlin Wall came down, communism came down. And somebody in Bulgaria published a book with the names and addresses of American universities. My dad found that book, bought it for me, and said, here, if you want to go to school in America, write them a letter. So that's what I did. I hand wrote over 100 letters to these universities. Obviously, they didn't have the name of the volleyball coach in there. So I would write a letter to the general admissions, and in my broken English would say, I am a volleyball player. Please connect me with the volleyball coach. And I started getting this beautiful brochures back. And let me mention that just posting those letters cost my family a fortune. And then getting some brochures back, I would get these glossy brochures with universities and pictures of students studying on the lawn under trees. It was just this wonderful picture that I was dreaming for. And of course, no mention of the volleyball coach, no mention of how I could get a scholarship. So every next letter that I received back became just like another stone to crush my dream. Well, lo and behold, when I was 11, I had a pen pal from Cyprus so that I could practice my English. And, we would send snail mail back and forth to each other and say how we're doing. And I had mentioned to her that this was my dream. I wanted to go to the United States and earn a scholarship, play volleyball. And one day I get a letter back from her and she says, look what I found in the trash. Now she worked in the Volleyball Federation in Cyprus. And what caught her eye was, the Greek letters look very, very different than English letters. It was an English letter that somebody had tossed out in the trash. And so she picked it up, looked at it, and realized it was a recruiting letter from the University of Idaho. A young coach there, Tom Hilbert, was doing the exact same thing that I was doing on this side. He was doing it on the other side. He was sending blind letters to federations in hopes of recruiting players. But of course, what would a federation do? Would they give up their players? I don't think so. So those letters all went in the trash. I was his only response.
Wow.
And so, I filled out the form, sent it back. And one night I'm sitting at dinner with my family and the phone rings and my mom answers it and she looks at me all white and pale. I think she's going to pass out. She goes, "It's for you from America." So it was the volleyball coach, and he got my letter. That's, the rest is history. That doesn't happen nowadays.
Incredible. Awesome story. Inma, is your audio maybe working now?
I hope so.
It is. Yes. Just make sure that everybody on, if you ever have two browser windows open with Blab going, we'll definitely get feedback. So just keep that in mind if you go browsing the internet for more things. If you want to know more about Lina, click on her picture there, on her name, and you can see more there. We'll also be posting a link about Lina and getting more into details. But Inma, why don't you introduce yourself, how you made that transition, where you came from, where you played, and where you are now?
Well, I think I should have went first because my story is not nearly as interesting, but I will tell it anyways. So yeah, I had a similar concern before coming to college or deciding to come to college because I had a lot of peer pressure telling me that I had to go professionally because I had the chance to right after high school. So in the moment of enlightenment, just like you did, I valued my education over what professional basketball could offer me. So I decided to go to the States. And that's when I was 17. And so what I did was I was playing basketball, just practicing. I wasn't really a player on that team, but there was a D1 basketball team in my island, in Mallorca, in Spain, for those who don't know. And one of the players there, her name is Muriel Page. She had a lot of contacts in the States, and she told me, if you're interested in a scholarship for an American college, I can help you. So I said, yes, I am. And she put me in contact with Coach Golub, who ended up being my coach for 4 years at the University of Toledo. And yeah, I left my country in Spain and went to Toledo when I was 17, having no idea what I was going to find. I know the internet and all that, but I wasn't all that good at research. All I had seen was a picture of the gym, and I remember this picture vividly to this day. And it was full because the year before they had played the championship game for the WNIT, and there were 7,000 fans in the stadium. And I was like, yep, I am going there. And that was the only reference that I had about Toledo. I made my decision to go. And then from there, I just spent 4 years, and I couldn't be more glad that I made that decision.
Wonderful.
However, after college, I did sign with a professional team, which was last year. And so the same that Lina said, I mean, you are very young, even when you come out of college. So if somebody's trying to decide whether they should go professionally when they're 15, 17, I think nowadays people realize that you can get more out of your sport if you use it in other means too, not just going professionally, playing basketball or volleyball or whatever it is, making money right away. Sometimes you have to decide whether you value other things too, and then go on with whatever you want to do with your sport.
Yeah, those are excellent points, really. And it brought to mind, again, a couple things, but most importantly, Sanya, again, this episode with Sanya Tomasevic, you really got to hear it, both of you, Inma and Lina, but everyone watching right now and listening, because she actually did that. She was injured. She went to school. She ended up becoming an All-American, gaining much more love for her sport, and she went professional after college. You're talking about a player who everybody in Serbia thought is done with the sport, not going to go anywhere. She ended up being one of the better players in Serbia, even though she didn't go to the national team for a long time. She ended up playing in the best teams around the world, Panathinaikos and Russia and all these different places. And so your opportunities do not end when you choose not to go abroad as a pro when you're 17, 16, 18, which is usual in European countries, but also down in South America. It's a little bit different in Asia. So I just really want young European and South American players especially to realize those are your options, and it does not stop or hurt your career. And sometimes coaches, and I would love a response from either one of you about this, sometimes coaches and federations will be totally against you leaving and going to the States. So I have a blog actually on trying to make that transition, like the 5 steps to start making that transition abroad. And the first one, unfortunately, is shh, but don't tell anyone except your friends and family, like that are extremely close to you. Be quiet about it. It's not like you're lying to people, but people will crush your dreams if you allow them to, because you're playing in sports world that's professional. In America, it's amateur. So coaches are definitely like, hey, oh my gosh, you can go to a college? Go, like do it. So did you either one of you have issues with people who were in your country that were totally against that idea?
I'll take that one 100%. And I think growing up in a communist country actually prepared me for how to handle that, because I knew that if I told anyone at that point, first of all, number one, I'd get ridiculed. It's like, oh no, that's impossible. You can't even do that. Why would you think that, you can do it? But then second of all, I would probably be off the team. I would probably get fired from my club if my intention was known at the time. And I know that kind of pressure still exists. So I think what you're saying is that you're not lying, but you are responsible for your life and for taking care of your future. And don't rely on somebody else in a federation or a coach or an agent that they have your best interest in mind. So think about it you're going to spend the rest of your life with the choices that you make at this time. So you have to really think about it this way. And, after maybe you can make a comment on that. But after that, I want us to talk about overuse injuries and what you were saying. Maybe that's another point that we can address.
Yeah. Inma, do you have something?
Yes, absolutely. I totally second what Lina said. I think for me, it was probably a couple of years later that I decided to go to college, but I had the same problems. I had coaches telling me that I shouldn't go, and they gave me reasons such as people in America would not care about you. Here, we know you. We want you on our team. You're going to get paid. Why would you ever? Blah, blah. And as she said, it is, at the end of the day, it's your decision, it's your life. And I think something very difficult, especially for a 15, 16, or 17-year-old, is finding what your truth is, especially when you're being bombarded all these ideas from external people that pretend to have your best interest in mind, but not really. So I think a very important thing to keep in mind is to listen to the right people. Because at the end of the day, you have to listen to yourself, but inevitably you're going to be influenced by what people say. So for me, it was my family. And the right people are going to tell you to just follow whatever you want to do. And I think that was the bottom line for me was, okay, I do want to get an education. I do not believe that people that have never been to America know how American people are. So I'm not going to believe that, they're bad people just because they think so. So I'm going to go and try for myself. And I'm glad to this day that I did it, because I found out that quite the contrary when I got here.
Yeah. And Lina, just to make sure that we don't forget that question that you want to talk about, can you make sure you /Q and type that in the side, and we're going to hit it at the end for sure, because that is a huge thing. And that's actually another thing that comes up so often with athletes, and we'll be able to direct them to another blab that's going to talk about mobility and off season and how to take care of your body the right way. So what I'd like to talk about now is, so we've talked about how it's possible to get scouted, teams start to look at you, maybe they contact you, you have a little bit of an idea of how that works. Inma, why don't you really quick, just how was the process of a team nowadays? Lina, sorry, but everything's moved so fast that now there's so many rules about how teams can talk to you and when, what ages, what dates, blah, blah, blah. What were the major ways that they talked to you, and which one made you feel most comfortable?
All right, so just really quickly, there are a lot of rules, many of which I'm not really familiar with, but I can tell you from my experience that the way that they recruited me was pretty much all via email. They sent me weekly emails from the day that they saw my film because they were very interested. And that was probably the summer before what was going to be my freshman year. So I was very impressed by the way that they kept in touch with me, the interest that they were showing. But again, it was all email until I decided to finally respond, which took me maybe 5 or 6 because I was shy. And then from then on, we started doing biweekly Sky calls, and they would just tell me all about the school. They told me that they were going to offer me via Skype. And then they also sent me some pamphlets and information about the university as an athletic program and also as an educational institution via mail. So in the mail in my house, I got all these, whatever they send, to show you the installations, to show you university and so on and so forth.
So and advertisements.
Yeah, exactly. And back then, which isn't really that long ago, it was 2011, but social media wasn't that big. So I didn't follow them on any social media site. It was mainly just email, Skype, and mail. But I know that today social media is a big thing. I mean, every school around the country has an Instagram, has Twitter, Facebook, of course, and Snapchat. That's right. And they usually have a person that's in charge of all of that. So it's quite crazy nowadays. But
just to take it away real quickly, athletes know, like, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about going abroad, if you're thinking about doing what Inma or Lina did, then you can reach out to these people yourself. It doesn't matter if you don't speak a lot of English. Use Google Translate. You know, if a friend is even translating what we're talking about to you, use Google Translate and just say, "Hi, I'm such and such," put your name and put a link to your CV. And in your CV, have your video. It's very important that in a CV, a resume, you have your physical details. So how tall you are, how much you weigh, how maybe high you jump or fast you run, and then where you played, the name of your team, your city, and video. As many videos as you can get. I don't care if it's 1, 2, 3 minutes long or 10 minutes long or a 2-hour match game. It does not matter. Get it on there, because if they don't see video, you can't get their interest, because so many applicants come through. I'm talking thousands of young athletes, and you truly could be the one that could go. But you have to have that video. You have to have your CV together. And that link that I posted earlier is telling you about those things. And any of us could help you. If you tweet at us, we will definitely give you advice. So really quick, I want to take it towards the next step. What were the differences, Lina, in going from Bulgaria? And by the way, one of my best friends that I've met through doing this project for the last couple of years is Gabi Cueva. She plays for the Bulgarian national team. So I'm so happy to have a Bulgarian on, because I've learned that, well, pretty much the only Bulgarian I know has one of the biggest hearts I've ever seen around the world. So it's a great, you two should definitely connect. But what were the differences between life in Bulgaria and sport in terms of like accommodations, facilities, coaching, these major aspects, and the States, obviously?
Right. And, you know, one of the things that I quickly realized is that facilities that exist here in the U.S., even at the university level, are actually much, much better. Like what you were saying about the athletic trainers and the care that you get as an athlete, that is, I would say, above and beyond the facilities that we had in Bulgaria at that time, certainly. But even now, if you make a comparison, one of the really things that struck me right as I came is that they gave us immediately 2 pairs of shoes. And, you know, in Bulgaria at the time that I was playing, that was rare. Not rare, but it didn't even happen. So those are the little things that make a difference, especially to a 17-year-old. I see in one of our chat questions is that, you know, how do you address the financial concern? And that's really a very good question. But those equipment, you know, brand new balls every single year that we had to train with. So I believe that what I got in the United States was even better than what I would get at the top level club in Bulgaria.
Hmm. And Inma, what were the differences for you?
Well, as far as facilities is concerned, it was like night and day. You don't really realize how good it is here unless you come from somewhere else. And as soon as I landed here, first thing that I did was just be impressed. I think for 2 days I was shocked. I don't think I blinked for the first 2 days to everything that I was seeing. And as she said, to the mind of a 17-year-old, that really it's really impressive at that age, especially depending on where you come from. So yeah, I think you cannot overlook that. I mean, you get paid when you play professionally, but the value of all the things that you get here is just above and beyond, like she said, and not to mention the education that they're paying for you.
Right.
So you really have to take all those things into account.
Yeah. And to address that question a little more that Susan Salzbrenner had asked about finance, this is a really, really important question. And it's something that I have had to address a lot with student athletes. And I'm going to ask both of you from your perspectives, but in my dealings with players, it's been either they have money to be able to afford, for instance, the test, to prep for, SAT and pay for college eligibility, because you need to go on that site and say, fill out everything to show how much money you might have received if you got accommodations like housing, car, anything like that. But not just those fees, but then the application fees for school and then traveling abroad. These are all really things that could hurt a lot of families. Their pockets aren't that deep, and some they're easier. But then you talk about when you're there, how do you pay for food, for clothing, for blah, blah, blah. And I want to paint a few different pictures. But before we do, I want to welcome Bassam Beidas. He's from Lebanon. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, sorry for the delay.
No problem. Why don't you go ahead? We're just talking about right now financial situations of families before foreigners move to the States. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, where you're from, what sport you play, where you got recruited to, and where you are now.
Okay. So as Ryan said, I'm from Beirut, Lebanon, even though I grew up in Egypt. And I'm a tennis player. I was recruited to Pepperdine University, which is in Malibu, California. For
Beautiful.
those of you who haven't, yeah, exactly. For those of you who haven't seen the campus, is pretty special. I went pro after graduating. I graduated in 4 years, and then I played for about a year and a half, injury-filled year and a half, and I'm currently in the transitional phase of my life. So that's where I'm at now.
All right. And yeah. I want to take it there and I'm going to throw it first to Inma. You paint the picture of a financial situation of an athlete, whether it's yourself or athletes that that have moved abroad, and what struggles you might have had with money while you were there in America.
Okay, well, the first thing that I think needs to be said is that, yes, you need to put some of your own money in the process of getting there. Just because there's some general fees or just random things like, obviously travel, but then also some tests. And me, for instance, I had to fly to somewhere to even take the test, and little things like that obviously, in my opinion, paid off, but it is an expense, and you have to be aware of it. That said, once you get here, usually pretty much everything is taken care of by your school, although that changes depending on what conference you play in. But usually if you're an European player, you're pretty good. Otherwise, they wouldn't recruit you. So I assume that 90% of them usually will go to schools that have enough money to pay for everything that they can. But there are little silly rules that don't allow schools to pay for certain things. But in general, they will make sure that you have everything that you need. The first year, at least that's how it worked in my university. The first year, they pay for for your residence life, for your food, for your travel while you're here, everything. And then the second year on, they give you a monthly stipend, which is like a wage basically. And you're able to move out of campus, pay for your own apartment, pay for your own car. And honestly, I never really had a money deficit in the 3 years that I was here getting a stipend. So my experience in that aspect was I didn't even have to think of it really. Yeah. But you do have to learn to finance yourself, to budget your expenses, because they give you money, and for that month you do whatever you need to do with it. So I think that's a very positive thing too. There's a lot of times the problems that professional players have is that they are given money for the first time and they don't really know how to budget it. So I think it's a learning experience too.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Lina, what was your experience?
So that's a real concern. You know, you're looking as a young player at 17, 18 years old, you're offered a contract, and you're looking at some real dollars coming in, and your family may be looking at that too. And there is a lot of pressure into making the decision. But just like Inma mentioned before, when you know what your values are and you know the direction of where you want to take your life, you're going to have to make some tough decisions, and you're going to have to make some sacrifices. In my case, my parents each got $200 a month. That was their salary when translated in the currency from Bulgarian to the American currency. So $200 a month each. With $400, we had to figure out how to save for an airplane ticket for me, how to save for all the tests that you were mentioning, for the prep that went into all the tests that we also had to pay for. And once I even got here, although I had a full ride scholarship, just like you were saying, my family decided that supporting me in this endeavor is so important that they moved out of their house, rented it out, so that they could have some extra money to support me while I'm here. Now, in that situation, I felt tremendous responsibility to them, obviously, but it wasn't a negative pressure. It was actually a motivational pressure. I knew that every decision that I made really mattered because it affected the people that were back home and were sacrificing on a daily basis for me when I was here. Now, what ended up happening is that in my junior year, I actually helped my sister get recruited. She also played volleyball, came to the US, played for University of San Diego. And 3 years after that, my parents, we were both able to help my parents come to the United States. So it became a full circle. But at first, there was no guarantee. And at 17, it makes you really grow up very fast and make some hard decisions and choices that you see the other kids. For example, that's another thing, is that you see the other kids spending money on different things, and then you want to spend money too, but you have to decide what's more important and for your future. Have a long-term vision.
I love that. And Bassam, why don't you take it away from your perspective about financing?
You know, the interesting thing about that is obviously wherever you are in the States, the costs like dorms, which are factored into the stipend, and food are, I mean, they cover it in a relative sense, in the sense that California is more expensive than, say, being in Kansas. But even though, I still found that it wasn't proportionally adequate, if you get what I'm saying, in the sense that, yeah, they tried to make up for the fact that you're in one of the most expensive areas of the country, but it still doesn't really make up for that. But at the same time, you always think, yeah, I mean, I'm going to need money to spend on a lot of other things. But as a student athlete, I think you're so busy with your sport, with your studies, that you really don't have that much time for, you know, doing a lot of other things. So I think the money that you are given is generally, if you're on a full scholarship, is enough to cover your essentials.
Mm-hmm. And about the process, when you were being recruited and the tests you had to take, the things you might have had to register for, maybe the prep that you might have had to do, what were your costs in those senses?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't do much prep for the SAT because I went to an English school my whole life. So it wasn't, I mean, they were kind of preparing us for that during school. So I didn't have any additional costs other than the test taking itself, which I took one time. So in that sense, I guess, I mean, I was lucky. Mm-hmm. But I'd like to say I could speak for many of my peers and say what they did, but again, they're in similar situations.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. And then for all of you, did you have any costs associated with applying to the school? Anything like that? I
think there was an application fee, and I think now to register with the NCAA, there is a fee that you have to pay. It's a one-time fee. I didn't speak any English when I came. I was obviously pretty good at reading and writing since I had been taking lessons most of my life, and was relying on those skills. But I had to pay for a special SAT class before I took the SAT, or before I took the TOEFL. I had to take a TOEFL at that time too. And those were financial strains on my family, no question about it. So if you don't have the buy-in from your family, I think that's a very difficult situation to be in. And you have to sit down. In most cases, I think your parents will be behind you if you're trying to get an education. So it wouldn't be a hard sell. And that's what you have to do.
Yeah. Inma, did you have anything?
No, I went through the exact same process. I had to take the SAT, the TOEFL. And I want to emphasize what she said about your family having to support you. I think that's the main thing. If you make them understand and you're financially able to do it, I think they will back you up, because it is a very sensible decision to try and get an education while you play your sport. But still, you do need their support, and especially at the beginning.
Yeah, and I want to throw in there. So I've had some athletes come to me and ask me about this, and they're worried about the costs, et cetera, et cetera. I want to throw out there one other means. So, for instance, Bassam, you were talking about how you didn't have to prep for SAT. You also probably could just breeze through a TOEFL.
I didn't have to take one. Yeah.
There you go. If you score a certain number or higher on the SAT in the portion for English, or not English, but language and vocab, certain schools have like rules. Like if you get this amount on that, you don't have to take the TOEFL, for instance. But I want people out there to know that if you haven't been properly prepared and versed in English, there are a couple options for you. If you don't speak very much English at all, if your basic knowledge of English is not very strong, then I suggest everybody at that age who probably has a smartphone or a tablet, I would get the Duolingo app. And I'm sure Susan, she's listening and she'll be able to find that link and post that. But the Duolingo app will allow you to learn English from a basic level, day one, right away. And then Khan Academy, I put the link in the side. Khan Academy is a place where they've teamed up with the company behind the SAT test, which is the test that gets you into all major universities and college in America and Canada. And they have a test prep that's free and that's extensive. Everything that you want to know, even the new SATs, all the test prep. So make sure that you use these free resources to learn. And there's also a lot of groups online. If you Google how to test or group for SAT test prep, or groups for TOEFL test prep, which is the language to see your understanding of English as a second language. So what I'd like to move forward on is, so we've gotten basically to America, right? We've gone through the whole recruiting process. We're there, we're playing. We know the differences are pretty big between most foreign countries and America. What would you say are the minuses for being in America, the things that made you maybe miss home a little bit more, the things that maybe had you struggle because you were a foreigner and it didn't work like they did back home? Lina, you want to take that one first, and then Inma, you can go after.
Sure. You know what was really challenging for me? Bulgaria is the only country in the world, and it's kind of it created some funny stories along the way, that we actually say yes like this and no like this.
Yeah. I know this.
So you can imagine at the frustration level of my teammates when they would ask me a question. At one point, I remember my coach just going over to them and saying, do not look at her. Just listen to what she says. So the communication on the court was sometimes very challenging. My setter would give me a signal, and I would go, and she would go, "That's what we're doing." And I say, "Yes, that's what we're doing." So some of those things could be challenging at first. My first semester in school, what was really good about Coach Hilbert in the University of Idaho, is where I went to school, is that he realized that I'm going to need help. And he arranged for me to have a tutor even when I was there. So that tutor, Phyllis Van Horn, to this day we're very, very good friends, helped me with a lot of the expressions that there were in the American language as well. For example, you could learn English in a book, but it's not the same as speaking English. So I felt sometimes isolated. I felt like I couldn't joke around with my teammates because oftentimes I didn't get the jokes, until maybe, they had to explain it to me, and then the moment was gone. So those are not easy things to handle as a young 17, 18-year-old. And you just have to have a lot of patience and a lot of trust.
Yeah. And Inma?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I'm a very talkative person by nature. In the first couple months in the United States, I was very frustrated because I wanted to say things that didn't have words for. And as you said, for a young person, that's a challenge sometimes. And I remember being with my teammates, and they were trying their best to, get me involved in the conversation, but sometimes it wasn't that easy. And I remember just saying over and over again, I was like, "You guys, I promise in Spanish, I'm a funny person. I promise you. I know this joke maybe wasn't very funny, but I am funny in reality." And I pretty much spent the first 4 months saying that over and over again. But I think the communication barrier is probably the main thing. But I think that's obvious. Another thing that was a little challenging for me was the change of weather. Because I come from an island in the middle of the Mediterranean where we barely have a winter. And I moved to the Midwest where they have snowstorms and crazy stuff that keeps you indoors for 3 days at a time. So that was definitely an adjustment. Yeah. But I think the main thing that you have to keep in mind is just be open-minded the entire time and just take whatever comes to you with humor and just trying to learn as much as you can.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And Bassam, before you go on to say your little piece about that, just mention a little bit more about the YouTube tutoring that you mentioned when we were talking about how you can prep for these tests and things.
Yeah, I'm studying for the GBAT right now. And it's crazy the amount of, I wish this was around when I was still in school, because the amount of stuff that's online now for free is just incredible. Even on YouTube, a lot of the big test prep companies like Kaplan and Manhattan, they will post a lot of free videos on YouTube. So, they're basically trying to draw you into using their paid service. But oftentimes the free videos are more than enough to help you out. So, and there are forums all over the place as well where you can find a lot of help. So,
okay. And then about the minuses.
For me, men's tennis is an extremely international sport at the collegiate level in the States. So I wouldn't say that I had the same sort of issues that they were having with regards to kind of communication with your teammates and your team. But one thing that I found difficult to adjust to was, because tennis is such an individual sport at the pro level, at the junior level, transitioning to being a cog, like just a cog in a machine, is a difficult transition for a tennis player who's used to it being all about me, and then suddenly you're in the team and the coach is focusing on 10 people, and he can't really tailor his advice and his coaching technique and methods to you. He has to think about 10 people. So, it's something you have to sort of adjust to and accept, and you have to do it quickly, because you can't really waste any time. You're only there for 4 years, and you want to benefit as much as possible. So,
awesome. And so I guess what I'd like to move on to talk about a little bit now is we're all the way up to this phase where there's some of the great things that are happening, and there's some of the minuses that are happening. What, let's say, Lina, what were the first things you realized about your growth from the time you came to the USA and started in school and the time you ended. How do you think your perspective in life and sport changed?
One of the things that was great, that going through the university system, taking all the classes, I realized that I gained a profession that I could use and fall back on for the rest of my life. And that gave me a lot of confidence in trusting that things will be okay. You know, I've made some choices that now I can take it to the next level. So immediately after college, I took a job and started working basically a 9-to-5 job that turned out to be 11 hours a day. And very quickly in the first few months, I realized that this is not necessarily something that I want to do, especially at the age of 21. You know, I came to college at 17, graduated in 4 years. At the age of 21, I was done with college, done playing. And then there was another desire in me that said, you know, I want to play more. I know there's more in me that I can give to this sport. And having the pressure now of having this full-time job that I didn't really like, although, you know, it was in my major, gave me the motivation to seek out another path. That's when beach volleyball became an Olympic sport, and I decided that, hey, I could try and play this new sport and really go for it. There were a lot of sacrifices along the way, but even in the hardest times of trying to play a professional sport after college, I knew that I could always fall back on my profession that I gained through the university experience.
Excellent. And Bassam, why don't you take this one?
I would say that the main thing that changed in me was my ability to handle responsibility. And also, I feel like I knew myself a lot better by the end of the 4 years. I mean, you know, 4 years in the collegiate system is pretty difficult. There are times when, you know, you're wondering what you're doing this for, what the end goal is. Do I want to be playing tennis? Do I want to just be studying? What do I want to do? And when you're faced with so many questions, you kind of have to look inside yourself and find answers for yourself. And that, you know, if you're doing that for 4 years, by the end of it, you kind of have a good idea of who you are and where you're going, sort of.
Thank you. That's true. Actually, I'm trying to think of how my perspective was when I moved abroad. And Inma, what was yours?
I think the main one for me was commitment. Obviously, if you're going to a foreign country to do something that you've put so much work in, that your family has made sacrifices for, you have to be truly committed. And I think up to that point, I never committed to something to such degree. And I learned the importance of giving it your all to a cause, to a program, to a sport. And at the same time grow as a person in so many different ways. So I think that was it for me.
Thank you. That's always interesting because, I mean, one of the major things I try to do on my podcast is have athletes talk about their experiences, and then what's really important, right, is the takeaway. So it's like when we're playing our sport, one of the ways that we're growing is because we're always challenged. Now, there's some science on how much you should be challenged in order to have that room for growth and how much is outside of just the realm of, you know, this is totally uncomfortable. But there's this transition that always happens, and we need to be aware of those things, because if we can see where we started, where we are, and where we were in between, like that transitional phase where we made the change, it can allow us to hack future changes and for the better. And I think that that's important, that the athletes remember these things. And one of the things that I propose is that if you are an athlete and you're going to go abroad, start a blog, even if it's a blog for you, even if it's just writing in a document, maybe Google Docs, or writing down old school, which is normal and it's better. Write down your experiences, whether it's in sport or in life, it does not matter. And then look back over them every month or so, or every year, doesn't matter, because you want to see what changes have happened. So I want to ask, Inma, is there anything that you feel that athletes abroad should absolutely understand before making this choice to go abroad? Or before even making the choice to try to go abroad, let's say?
I think the main thing is exactly what I said. You have to be fully committed. I think, and I think I speak from everybody that's been in the States. There's a difference in culture here, in a sense that people expect everything that you've got, and I don't mean 100%. I mean 150%. So I've seen people come from Europe to here and have very successful careers. And I have seen people come here, be shocked because they were not prepared mentally, and leave after 1 year. And I've seen people being kicked out because they try to do the same things the same way that they did when they were at home, and try to use those things and do them here. And it doesn't really work. I think wherever you go, you have to be open to whatever their culture is and adapt to it. And don't expect them to do the same for you because you're outnumbered. You're the only foreign person, chances are. And if you truly want to have a good experience here, you have to absolutely be mentally prepared to adapt to their rules, to adapt to their way of doing things, which is not easy, but worth it in the end.
But worth it in the end. This is always the final thing, and I love that people bring it full circle. It's such a struggle, but it was so worth it. And Lina, I want you to definitely to back up everything at the end and go over overuse injuries and how that can happen. But Bassam, why don't you take it away really quick from your side?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that one thing I think was definitely one of my mistakes when I first went to the States, and I know a couple of guys on my team who were also freshmen that same year. We all wanted to go pro after college. That was our main goal from the off. But I don't think we really understood and appreciated how much we had to give to the education side of things. So it was definitely a shock to our systems the first semester, the first year. I think, part of it is a maturity thing, but, if there's a way to prep us for that from before we get to school, I think it would definitely be something to think about for or prospective student athletes to be aware of.
Thank you. And Lina, from your perspective.
Right. One of the, you can see everybody here on this call has the attitude that adversity gives you tools, and somehow the experience that you're going through right now will make you better in the end. And that's an important, very, very important thing that we learn as athletes, but then you can apply it for the rest of your lives. I conducted a series of interviews, and I'll give you guys the website to post to anybody that wants to listen, with athletic directors at universities and top coaches and some of the top athletes on the tools that you need outside of your sport in order to make it at the college level. And that applies for American kids as well as anybody that's coming from international. But those are some life skills that you have to apply that will take you through the challenges. And the question that I always ask myself is, how can I get better than this? How am I getting better from this experience? And just asking that question, not necessarily having the answer, goes a long way into getting you there.
Excellent. So what I definitely want to talk about really quick are the overuse injuries, because we're wrapping up here. We have 7 minutes left. And I think that there also are these things that you need to think about in your preparation. So we talked about CVs and having your video and being prepared and knowing how to send a message to schools, right? And once you start communicating with schools, what to expect. They're going to message you via email or maybe snail mail even to send you brochures. They're going to do phone calls. They might do Snapchat and Twitter and all these things, because that's all available within these different rules. And you don't have to worry about the rules. The schools know them. And if they violate any rules, they will get in trouble, not you. But you need to be aware of some of the things that you could do that could get you in trouble. So definitely getting on ncaa.org and the other NAIA, all these types of things will link up that stuff. That's important to do your research. But overuse injuries come from what, Lina, in your opinion? Because and how can they hurt? How can they be detrimental to athletes trying to go abroad?
Well, I started playing volleyball when I was 8 years old, and that's the only sport I played my entire life. And I think that you guys would agree that when you're when you're growing up in a country and you're deciding you're choosing your sport path, you're not thinking about playing other sports. What I realized with my experience in the United States, it's the value of taking a rest, giving my body the time that it needs to recover. By the age of 17 or 18, most of my teammates in Bulgaria had major surgeries, shoulder surgeries, knee surgeries from doing the same thing and not necessarily doing it right, and not recovering properly. And what the blessing in disguise for me was going to the United States and not having this kind of a crazy schedule. I don't often say that, and my coach definitely told me not to say it. He said, I thought I retired when I came to play college in the States because, we only had one practice a day that was 3 hours. And how hard was that? Where in Bulgaria, we had 3 a days, 2 a days. Our recovery time was basically one morning off, Sunday morning after playing, 7 days in a row. So that is what leads, in my opinion, to overuse injuries. And then really taking the time to recover is something that happened naturally when I came to the US because we didn't have this crazy season.
And just do either one of you, Inma or Bassam, have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, Inma, do you have anything to say, or did I cut you off?
No, you can go first.
Okay. Well, I mean, at least with tennis, I felt that there was a certain pressure to play regardless of how you felt all the time. And that wasn't just for matches, also for practice. And I think in my case, it hurt me in the long run because there are a lot of times when I wasn't capable of playing and I was just pushing through it. And I think there are certain times when you should push through it, but it's important to recognize the difference between something that sort of, I guess, well, our coach always used to call it being hurt or being injured. He'd always ask us, are you hurt or are you injured? I never really understood the difference. But if I were to put it in my own language, I would say the difference between kind of, soreness and an actual injury, and I think that's one of the key things for an athlete to be able to know their own body. And, if you can't play, you can't play. I think you have to look at, especially if you want to play after university. And even if you're just playing 4 years at university, it's a long 4 years and you have to look after your body and, think long term rather than short term.
Awesome. Thank you. And Inma, really quick, because in the next 3 minutes, we need to wrap up. So let's try and get this answer in under a minute if you can.
Sure. No, I can. I was just going to say that I think the main thing is prevention, or at least it was for me. I was aware that I was going to play all year round because I played in college and I played for my national team during summer. And I was very lucky as far as injuries is concerned, but I also did a lot of prevention work. So I think if you're smart in that aspect, you should be fine unless you get unlucky. But yeah.
Thank you for adding that. And I just want to say that people out there, I know Susan is about to actually paste this into the blab I was going to, but the next session right now coming up is going to be hosted by myself, and it is about mobility, how to improve your performance through mobilizing techniques and flexibility, like stretching, the proper technique, all of those kind of things. And join us there with Robin Schrute, who's been watching this right now. Hi. And Sarah Walls and Reed Hall, who is formerly of Team Canada. So thank you all for being on. And just really quick, in let's say 15 seconds or less, how would you wrap up your advice to the younger you, or the type of player that would be going about this right now? Take that away, Lina.
Know what's really important to you and take the time to figure that out.
Thank you. And Bassam?
I would say absorb it all and stay in the moment because, it's all happening so quickly. It's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture. But I think, you definitely have to keep that in mind.
Thank you. Inma?
I would say you're going to make a lot of mistakes, a lot. So make sure then when you know that you're doing the right thing, work very hard so that you kind of make up for it.
Awesome. Great advice, you guys. Thanks so much for you all being on. And everybody go ahead and click the link that's going to be right here in the chat She just posted it to get to the next blab. So I got to kick you all out, but make sure you tune in and tweet out what we talked about and the next ones to come. Bye, you guys.
Nice to meet you guys. Great.
Kicking it out, Lina. Bassam. Ciao, ciao. Bye. Thanks.